Now, it's hard to believe that in a few days, on December 18th to be exact, it'll be 9 years since the release of The Force Awakens, and over 10 years since we got the first teaser trailer for it, but over 9 years since that movie came out and immediately set the internet on fire with countless theories about everything from who are Rey's parents to what's the deal with Snoke or the Knights of Ren, to why in the heck is Luke Skywalker on that island instead of out there helping his friends save the galaxy. Unfortunately though, as much fun as those days were, as much fun as it was to theorize about where the story might be going next, a lot of those questions either didn't get the most satisfying answer ever, or they were simply never answered at all and were instead ignored, forgotten about, or simply cut from the equation altogether. And we were basically called foolish for caring and theorizing about them in the first place. And one of those questions that never really got answered, though also for whatever reason wasn't the most speculated upon in the first place, there weren't tons and tons of videos made talking about it, like there were some of the other questions, like Rey's parents, where pretty much everyone in the Star Wars galaxy turned into a suspect. But there weren't a ton of videos made about it, even though it was actually maybe the most important question of them all in some respects, considering how much it had to do with the motivation of our main antagonist, that being Kylo Ren. The question was even put in the first full trailer as if it was going to be extremely important, as again it really should have been, when you stop and realize that what the villain wants, what they're after or trying to accomplish, is, well, oftentimes what the story is really all about.
I will finish what you started.
And though, sure, we could just assume, and I think many did and still do, especially considering they really didn't go anywhere with it, but we could assume that this was nothing more than Kylo Ren being obsessed with his grandfather, being obsessed with Darth Vader, and wanting to just be like him, and that he didn't really mean anything when he said that, or anything very specific, beyond perhaps him, Kylo, seeing Vader's turn back to the light as, I don't know, some sort of weakness or failure on Vader's part that he would now fix or not let happen to him. Keeping in mind he himself, again Kylo, was feeling the pull to the light and trying to resist it.
I feel it again. The pull to the light.
And kind of going along with that, it being nothing all too specific, I mean, it could have simply been Kylo wanting to do what Anakin and or Vader once wanted to accomplish, but ultimately, from Kylo's point of view, failed to do. That being, straightening out the galaxy and making it a nice, safe, and peaceful place for everyone, just as long as you did everything he said you were supposed to do or allowed to do.
I have brought peace, freedom, justice, and security to my new empire.
But what if that line, what if Kylo wanting to finish something Vader started, meant more than that, a lot more? What if Kylo was obsessed with doing something that Vader, or Anakin, as the Chosen One, was supposed to do? Something that either goes along with or goes beyond just bringing balance to the Force. Something that Vader was indeed trying to do, but needed Luke's help to pull off for whatever reason, hence Vader's desire to kind of recruit him, for his son to join him, beyond it just being Vader following the Sith way of taking on an apprentice to overpower the Master and become the Master himself, even though, yeah, that's probably all George Lucas ever intended it to be, though eventually, yes, Vader or Anakin did come to care about his son, obviously, as that's even what turns him back to the light. But anyway, before I get off track, what if Kylo also now needs help to do whatever this was or still is, since, or so he feels, the responsibility to fulfill the prophecy of the Chosen One has now fallen upon his shoulders after Luke perhaps flat out rejected the notion that the prophecy hadn't already been fulfilled with the destruction of the Sith? What if the prophecy had indeed been misread somehow, as Yoda even suggested?
A prophecy that misread could have been.
And that there was still something left undone for the Chosen One to do, and Kylo was taking it upon himself to do it, but again needed a little bit of help to pull it off, like Vader once thought he needed Luke to help. And what if, all his life, Kylo had been having visions of a girl who could help him pull it off? Which is why he reacted this way when hearing about a girl helping FN-2187 get away with the BB-8 unit.
What girl?
What if he'd indeed been having visions of none other than Rey his whole life and had been essentially waiting for her because, sure, they were part of some sort of dyad, we could still go with that, I suppose. Rey could have either been a nobody or turned out to be some sort of granddaughter or creation of Palpatine's, I guess. Though I think it would have been simpler and made more sense for the Skywalker story if Rey were indeed a Skywalker. If she were a lost daughter of Luke's, and her getting lost, if you will, or him thinking she was dead, was part of the reason Luke ultimately exiled himself. He'd somehow failed her, then he failed Ben when he fell to the dark side, and he was afraid to fail anyone else, or perhaps he somehow knew he couldn't save Ben, that it was now up to someone else, to another, and he went to the island to wait because that's what he felt he was supposed to do. And eventually his long-lost daughter shows up to be the one. I don't know, a lot of ways they could have gone with that besides Luke just flat out giving up and wanting to die. But either way, back then, after The Force Awakens came out and the internet, myself included, began to theorize, we all thought there, of course, had to be a deep, intricate plan for the whole trilogy already laid out that was just going to blow our minds and tie back into the previous parts of the saga, to the previous two trilogies. There was no way you'd just dive right in and try to make it all up as you go, even letting multiple different writers and directors come in and do their own thing instead of having a solid game plan in place that they would have to follow, for the most part anyway. They'd of course have some flexibility with the parts of the story they wrote and or directed. And if we really stop and think about what those first two trilogies were, what they meant for the larger story, for Star Wars itself, or for the Skywalker saga, well, the first one, or the prequels, was all about the fall of Anakin and the rise of Darth Vader. The second one, the original trilogy, was about the fall of Vader and the return of Anakin Skywalker. While the third one, the sequel trilogy, really should have been about the legacy of Anakin and Darth Vader, which side is ultimately embraced by those who carry that legacy with them forward, by his children and grandchildren. And back then, I really thought, again, when I believed there had to be a grand plan, that the reason why Kylo was speaking to the helmet of Darth Vader, and why in some of the books at the time, like the Aftermath trilogy, there was this idea being explored that the Sith could leave a piece of themselves behind after they die, a sort of remnant or echo of themselves, you might say, that even was seen in a way in the Clone Wars with the remnant of Darth Bane, that they could stain something that was once important to them, like a helmet, for example. I thought Kylo was talking to and being influenced by some sort of remnant of Darth Vader. Not the real Darth Vader, or Anakin, mind you, but a part of the dark side that had coalesced into an evil spirit of his, for a lack of a better way of putting it. And all the while Kylo was talking to Vader, Rey, who was either Luke's daughter or not, was being guided through Anakin's old lightsaber that had also once belonged to Luke, but she was being guided by the Force Ghost of Anakin Skywalker, as well as the other Force Ghosts as well, to Luke in order to be trained and to hopefully save Kylo or Ben, instead of joining with him where together Kylo hoped, they could achieve what Vader had once tried to achieve, what he had once started. The trilogy again would be about which legacy wins and endures, Vader or Anakin, and the battle would be fought via Kylo and Rey, and which could save or turn the other. And though, honestly here, we can point out a lot of mistakes and dumb decisions made by those who created the sequel trilogy, such as I've discussed many times before, not bringing all the original trilogy characters back together on screen at the same time, one more time, and for one final win before everything falls apart and is ultimately saved, primarily by the new characters, by the next generation, but them virtually ignoring Anakin Skywalker in the Skywalker saga, in a story that had been really all about him when you really strip it all away. But his name never once is even spoken in the sequel trilogy, with no appearance of his Force Ghost either, unless you count his voice at the very end of The Rise of Skywalker being heard amongst all the other Jedi. But his absence from the trilogy and not really being about him and the legacy of Vader just might be the biggest mistake of all. I mean, the question of how can this truly add to and finish Anakin's story through his children and grandchildren really should have been the very first question they ever asked in regards to this new trilogy, But instead, it was never asked at all or addressed. Anakin was apparently the past in their mind, and this trilogy, unfortunately, well, it let the past die. They killed it, you could even say. Well, that's all I got for you this time. Hopefully you enjoyed this little trip down memory lane back when the Force Awakens had just come out and the world was abuzz with Star Wars and theories and hopeful for its future. But either way, now it's your turn to take to the comments below and tell me what you think. Was not properly connecting the sequels to Anakin's story to the previous two trilogies? Was that where, from the start, the sequels went all wrong? Or maybe you love the sequels regardless of being connected to Anakin's story or not. Whatever the case may be, leave a comment below and let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.